Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Sherwood getting ready to talk about our theme lesson. And so our biggest question for theme is, how can I find the theme of the text? And remember in class we talked about how theme is probably the toughest element of the 5 elements of literature to talk about, only because there aren't any other components to it other than you have to understand what theme is as definition in order to find it in a text. So let's just kind of talk about this. And again, if you ever need help, I'll pull you for a small group, or you can email me, edmodo.me, ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, you're not gaining knowledge. And as you all know, knowledge is power. And again, our outcomes for theme are to critically consume the text, because as a reader, you need to make sure you understand everything and have a critical eye in order to really dig deep into that text. So, first, theme is the underlying message of a story or a poem. Theme is a big idea, something that you can generally learn about life. So, it could be, tell the truth, good versus bad. It could be, all these different types of big ideas. For example, love prevails or persistence pays off. We've talked about some of these themes in class, but just as a reminder. And so we're going to talk about finding those themes. So sometimes an author will come right out and state the theme of a story or a poem. So just like this example, go ahead and read it. Remember, we read this in class. And hopefully you remembered that the theme of this was that it's better to be honest than to have money. And it's all about honesty and not cheating your way out of it. And clearly this person felt guilty. And here we can use the text evidence to prove that. Another way to find theme, especially if the author is directly telling us, is to look at the end of the story. That will help you to find that text evidence a lot faster. Typically on state tests, you'll find themes that are directly stated, just because it's a faster way to collect data and it's less subjective. So that's really nice. But most of the times when you're reading a novel, the theme is not stated. So for this example about the butterflies, we had to really dig deep into the text to find several different themes. And in class, we talked about how the theme could be doing the right thing, how it could be animals being free, and just making sure that you let things go. If you really love something, you let it go. All of those themes were absolutely correct. You all showed great text evidence. And again, if you can prove what you're claiming with textual evidence and the appropriate interpretation, you're just going to be just fine when it comes to extended responses. And so again, we talked about our evidence, how the butterfly erupted from the cage and flew all the way to the end of the yard and down by the hill. That kind of led us to wild creatures should be free. Again, that was the theme that I had discovered. I know many of you found that it was the right thing to do, was the theme of this text. All of these examples are absolutely correct because you can prove it with textual evidence. And so some common themes I want you to really take note of. If you want to write these down in your notebooks, that might be a really good idea. Persistence pays off. Remember in the story Just Once that the moose wanted to run the ball several times. He asked and he asked and he asked, and then finally he was able to run the ball. Honesty is better than cheating. You see stories all the time where if the character is lying, like Pinocchio, his nose grows, right? And so it's always going to be better to tell the truth so that bad things don't happen to you. It's more important to be nice than popular. I used the example of Mean Girls. The main character of that story definitely learned her lesson by the end. Be careful what you wish for. Rumpelstiltskin is a great example, especially for my once upon a time friends. And love is the most important force. Most of our fairy tales often talk about how love is the most important force in nature and how it prevails over evil. We also talked about this poem. We talked about how at the beginning of the poem the author felt sad because it was a rainy day, and at the end of the poem the author changed his feelings, and so the theme of it becomes more happiness. And we could see that based off these choices there are two different kinds of themes that are just within this one poem, and that happens all the time in poems. And hopefully you remember that good can come from bad, a cheerful attitude can overcome the obstacles. Even if you were to say something along the lines of, when you get lemons, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, right? We've talked about this as well. And so, again, here's the evidence that helps us to identify that theme or either one of those themes. And remember, we talked about the different kinds of cheerful attitudes. So it's really about the intonation and the explanation points in the second half that really tells us it's a cheerful attitude. So hopefully from this video and from our lesson in class, you learned that theme was an underlying message that the author is trying to teach you about life. It's typically not stated straight through the text, but if it is, it's going to be at the end of the story. And it helps you, especially if you study the character and the conflict, you will be able to find the theme every single time. So again, theme is the underlying message of a piece of text, and you can find it usually at the end, or you can use clues to figure out the theme. And again, we studied this with All-American Slurp, and you should know why it's important to discover the theme. So that's what I want you to answer on Edmodo within the next week or so. Please start a discussion on Edmodo with your classmates, talking about why is it important to discover the theme of a text. Thanks so much, and you have a great evening.